she rushed her dying daughter to the hospital, only to find her billionaire CEO ex-husband who disowned her was the only neurosurgeon who could operate. When's her birthday, Brooke? June 14th. 2017. We separated in October 2016. Yes. Which means you were pregnant. When we separated. You were already pregnant. I found out 2 weeks after I moved out. And you didn't tell me. No. His voice dropped to something cold and dangerous. You sat in a parking lot with my child in your body and you drove home. You looked at me through a window and decided I didn't deserve to know I had a daughter. You made it very clear you didn't want children. Not now, maybe never. Those were your exact words, Garrett. So you made the decision for both of us. I made the decision to protect my daughter from a father who would resent her for existing. Does she know? Does Paige know I'm her father? No. So for 7 years, I've had a daughter I didn't know existed. And tomorrow morning, I'm supposed to cut into her brain and save her life. Yes. That's exactly what you're supposed to do. This conversation happened at 4 o'clock in the morning in a hospital room on the 4th floor of Children's Hospital of Philadelphia.
It's time to stop believing lies. Live boldly and unapologetically after 60.
26 hours before Dr. Garrett Reed would perform the most important surgery of his career. On a little girl with green eyes who loved purple rabbits and asked questions about gravity. A little girl he just discovered was his daughter. Let me tell you how we got here. October 17th, 2024. Franklin Middle School. 2:30 in the afternoon. This is where everything changed. Brooke Torres had learned in 7 years of single motherhood that a mother's instinct is rarely wrong. Sitting in the art room at Franklin Middle School that Tuesday afternoon, watching her daughter Paige press both palms against her temples for the 3rd time in an hour, every cell in Brooke's body was telling her something was very wrong. Mama. The word came out quietly, carrying the particular restraint of a 7-year-old trying not to worry the parent she'd learned too young to protect. My head hurts worse than before. Brooke set down the paintbrush she'd been cleaning and crossed the room in 4 strides. She'd brought Paige to work with her today because the school nurse had called that morning about another headache. The 4th one in 2 weeks. Brooke had stopped believing they were nothing 3 days ago. Scale of 1 to 10. Brooke knelt in front of her daughter, searching her face the way she'd learned to search it over 7 years for signs of fever, pain, fear, any of the 1,000 small emergencies that come with raising a child alone. 8. Paige whispered the number, and then her eyes rolled back and she slumped forward into Brooke's arms. The world went very slow and very fast at the same time. Brooke caught her daughter's weight, feeling how small she was, how fragile, how completely dependent on Brooke to know what to do next. Her hands moved on autopilot, laying Paige gently on the floor, checking her airway, watching her chest rise and fall, counting the seconds between breaths. Someone call 911. Brooke's voice came out steady even though her hands were shaking. Tell them 7-year-old female, loss of consciousness, history of severe headaches. A student ran for help. Another backed away, eyes wide. Brooke pulled out her phone with one hand while keeping the other on Paige's pulse point, feeling the steady thump that meant her daughter was still here, still breathing, still alive. Her sister Allison answered on the 2nd ring. I need you at Franklin Middle School right now. Paige collapsed. I'm calling an ambulance, but I think it's going to be faster if you drive us. I need you to be calm and I need you to drive fast. I'm leaving now. Allison's voice shook, but she didn't ask questions. Brooke loved her for that. 5 minutes. The 911 dispatcher walked Brooke through the steps. Keep her on her side. Monitor her breathing. Don't move her unless absolutely necessary. The ambulance is 7 minutes out. 7 minutes felt like 7 hours. Paige stirred once, her eyelids fluttering, a small moan escaping her lips. Brooke smoothed the dark hair back from her daughter's forehead, the same hair she brushed every morning before school, the same forehead she kissed every night before bed. Stay with me, baby. Mama's right here. You're going to be fine. The words were as much for herself as for Paige. When Allison's Honda pulled up to the school entrance 4.5 minutes later, Brooke made a decision. She scooped Paige into her arms, feeling the dead weight of unconsciousness, and carried her to the car. A teacher held the door open. The school principal was on the phone with the ambulance, redirecting them to meet at the hospital. Go! Brooke climbed into the back seat with Paige cradled against her chest. Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. Don't stop for anything. Allison drove the way Brooke had never seen her drive before. Fast but controlled, weaving through traffic, one hand on the wheel and one reaching back occasionally to touch Brooke's knee in silent support. The drive to Children's Hospital of Philadelphia took 12 minutes that felt like 12 hours. Brooke held Paige's hand in the back seat, talking to her daughter the entire time, keeping her conscious when she stirred, watching her pupils like the dispatcher had instructed, doing everything she'd been told to do while they waited for help that felt like it was coming too slow. Stay with me, baby. We're almost there. You're going to be fine. Mama's right here. I've got you. We're almost there. Paige's hand was small and cold in hers. Brooke thought about all the hands she'd held in 7 years. Helping her daughter learn to walk. Crossing streets. The first day of kindergarten when Paige had been so brave until the classroom door closed and then had pressed her small palm against the window. Every scraped knee, every bad dream, every moment of childhood fear or pain or joy. None of those moments had prepared her for holding this same hand while her child drifted in and out of consciousness in the back seat of her sister's Honda, praying to a God she wasn't sure she believed in anymore that they would make it to the hospital in time. The emergency entrance at Children's Hospital was organized chaos. The kind that happens when everyone knows exactly what they're doing and does it fast. Brooke pushed through the automatic doors carrying Paige, and a nurse was there immediately, taking her daughter from her arms before Brooke could protest. What happened? The nurse was already moving toward a bed, calling out to someone Brooke couldn't see. How long has she been unconscious? She collapsed about 20 minutes ago. Severe headache, scale of 8, then loss of consciousness. She's had 4 headaches in 2 weeks. Brooke followed, Allison right behind her. She's 7 years old. No major medical history. No allergies. She's been healthy except for the headaches. Another nurse appeared with a clipboard, asking questions Brooke answered automatically. Name: Paige Isabel Torres. Age: 7. Date of birth: June 14th. Medical history: none. Insurance: yes, through the school district. Father's information. Brooke's voice caught for just a second. Not in the picture. The nurses exchanged a glance but didn't push. They were wheeling Paige away now, through double doors Brooke wasn't allowed to follow through. A young resident with kind eyes and tired lines around his mouth stopped her gently. We need to examine her first. Someone will come get you as soon as we know more. You did everything right getting her here this fast. Brooke stood in a waiting room that smelled like antiseptic and fear and let her sister hold her hand the way she'd been holding Paige's. She tried not to think about the fact that she was alone in this. Had been alone in every major moment of Paige's life. Every fever. Every milestone. Every parent-teacher conference. Every birthday cake baked at midnight after a shift at the charter school where she taught art to 8th graders who mostly didn't care about watercolors but sometimes surprised her. She'd made her peace with that years ago. Or thought she had. Right up until this moment when the piece revealed itself to be simply a story she'd told herself because the alternative was too heavy to carry and still get up in the morning. You okay? Allison's voice was quiet. No. Brooke's answer was honest. I'm not okay. But I will be. After we know what's wrong. After they fix it. After I can take her home. They will. Allison squeezed her hand. Whatever this is, they'll figure it out. This is one of the best children's hospitals in the country. Brooke nodded because speaking would have meant crying and she wasn't ready to cry yet. She needed to stay functional. Paige might wake up and need her. Might be scared. Might ask for her mama. The waiting room was full of other people carrying their own private emergencies. A father pacing with a baby who wouldn't stop screaming. A grandmother sitting very still with her hands folded, lips moving in silent prayer. Two parents huddled together over a phone, both crying quietly. Brooke looked away. She couldn't hold anyone else's pain right now. She had enough of her own. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. Brooke watched the clock on the wall and tried not to imagine what was happening behind those double doors. CT scans. Blood work. Neurological exams. All the tests they ran when a child collapsed for no apparent reason. She thought about the headaches. How she'd taken Paige to their regular pediatrician a week ago after the second one. The doctor had said it was probably nothing. Kids get headaches. Stress from school. Not enough water. Too much screen time. Give her children's Tylenol and call if it gets worse. It had gotten worse. Brooke should have pushed harder. Should have demanded more tests. Should have trusted her instinct that something was wrong instead of listening to a doctor who saw 30 patients a day and couldn't possibly know Paige the way Brooke knew her. Stop. Allison's voice cut through the spiral. You did everything right. You brought her here. That's what matters. At the 40-minute mark, the double doors opened and a doctor walked through. Brooke's entire body went still. Not just a doctor. The doctor. Dr. Garrett Reed stood in the waiting room doorway in surgical scrubs, a tablet in one hand, looking exactly like the man she'd loved 8 years ago and nothing like him at all. Older. Leaner. With new lines around his eyes that came from years of looking at things too small and too important to get wrong. His hair had gone silver at the temples. He'd always said it would. That his fathers had done the same by 40. He was 42 now. Brooke knew because she'd counted every year. Even the ones where she'd tried not to. He looked up from the tablet, saw her, and went completely still in a way that told her he hadn't known she was the mother in room 4. Hadn't read her name on the chart. Had walked in here thinking this was just another case. Brooke. His voice carried across the waiting room. Not a question. Garrett. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Not a greeting. Allison, sitting beside her, looked between them and had the good sense to say nothing. Garrett recovered faster than she did. That made sense. He'd spent 8 years becoming one of the country's leading pediatric neurosurgeons. Building a reputation for steadiness under impossible pressure. She'd spent 8 years teaching teenagers about perspective and raising a daughter who had his eyes and didn't know it. Your daughter. Something in his voice caught on the word in a way she didn't have time to examine. Paige. She's stable right now. But we need to talk about what we found on the CT scan. He gestured toward a consultation room off the main waiting area. Brooke followed him, legs moving on autopilot. Allison started to follow until Brooke turned and said quietly, "Wait here. Please." The consultation room was small and private. A computer screen and 2 chairs positioned at an angle that some designer had probably decided was less confrontational than facing each other directly. Garrett pulled up an image on the screen. Her daughter's brain. Lit up in cross-sections of gray and white. And there in the left temporal region, a mass that didn't belong. This is what's causing the headaches and the seizure. Garrett's voice dropped into the particular cadence of a doctor delivering news he'd delivered 100 times before but never got easier. It's a grade 2 astrocytoma. A type of brain tumor. In children, these are often operable. And the prognosis with complete resection is generally very good. Brooke heard the words from very far away. Tumor. Brain. Operable. Prognosis. Each one landing like a separate stone in water she was trying not to drown in. Generally. She repeated the word because she'd learned in 7 years of advocating for her daughter at every doctor's appointment and school meeting that the qualifiers were where the truth lived. The location is complex. Garrett zoomed in on the image, showing her things she couldn't fully understand but tried to anyway. It's near the language processing centers. Surgery carries risks. Potential impact to speech, memory, motor control. But without surgery, the tumor will continue growing. The headaches will get worse. There will be more seizures. Eventually. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. How soon? Brooke asked. We need to operate within the week. Sooner if she has another seizure. I've pioneered a technique using intraoperative mapping that allows us to remove the tumor while monitoring brain function in real time. It significantly reduces the risk of damage to healthy tissue. Of course he had. Of course Garrett had spent the last 8 years becoming the exact person capable of saving their daughter's life. Brooke felt a hysterical laugh building in her chest and swallowed it. I'll need to review the full scans and consult with my team. Garrett continued in that same measured doctor voice. But based on what I'm seeing, I believe surgery is her best option. I'd like to schedule it for Thursday morning if you consent. Thursday. That's 2 days. Yes. And you would do the surgery. I'm the chief of pediatric neurosurgery here. And this is my specific area of expertise. But if you'd prefer another surgeon, I can refer you to someone else. I understand this is complicated given our history. No. Brooke cut him off. If you're the best chance she has, then you're doing it. This isn't about us. This is about Paige. Garrett looked at her for a long moment. She saw something move across his face. Not quite recognition. He'd recognized her the moment he walked into the waiting room. This was something else. The beginning of a question he hadn't formed yet. There are consent forms. He said finally. And I'll need a complete medical history. Father's information as well. For genetic factors and family history of neurological conditions. There is no father. Brooke said the lie she'd told for 7 years. It came out automatically, smooth with practice. Not in the picture. She watched him take that in. File it away with everything else he was managing. She wondered if he could tell she wasn't being entirely truthful. If 8 years had erased his ability to read her, or if he simply had more important things to focus on than the personal life of a woman he'd loved once and walked away from. I'll have a nurse bring the paperwork. Garrett stood. Paige is being moved to a room on the 4th floor. You can see her once she's settled. We'll keep her for monitoring until the surgery. He moved toward the door and paused with his hand on the handle. Brooke, he said, not looking back at her. I'm glad you brought her here. This is treatable. I've done this surgery 61 times in the last 3 years. She's going to be okay. It was the most personal thing he'd said since walking into the waiting room. It cost him something. She could hear it in his voice. Thank you. She said, and meant it, and hated that she meant it. He left. Brooke sat alone in the consultation room, staring at the image of her daughter's brain still glowing on the screen. She let herself think for the first time since Paige collapsed what she'd been holding off. The man who'd walked away from her 8 years ago without looking back was about to hold their daughter's life in his hands. And he didn't even know she was his. Brooke found her way back to the waiting room on legs that didn't feel quite steady. Allison stood up immediately, reading everything in Brooke's face. What did they say? Brain tumor. Operable. Surgery on Thursday. Brooke heard herself delivering the information in short, factual sentences. The same way Garrett had delivered it to her. Oh God. Allison's hand went to her mouth. But they can fix it. They think so. He thinks so. He? Allison's eyes sharpened. That doctor. You know him. Brooke looked at her sister. At the person who'd been there through everything. Who'd held her hand in the delivery room when Paige was born. Who'd helped her move into her first apartment as a single mother. Who'd babysat every time Brooke had a parent-teacher conference or needed to work late or just needed 1 hour to herself to remember she was a person outside of being someone's mother. That was Garrett, Brooke said quietly. Allison's eyes went wide. Garrett. You're Garrett. The one who left. The one who said he couldn't do family. The one who... Yes. That Garrett. Except he's not mine. He hasn't been mine for 8 years. And now he's the only neurosurgeon who can save our daughter's life. Does he know? About Paige? No. And I need you to not say anything. Not to him. Not to anyone. Not until after the surgery. After she's safe. After I know she's going to be okay. Brooke. Allison's voice was gentle. He's going to figure it out. She has his eyes. That same unusual green. Anyone who looks at them together will see it. I know. But right now, all I need is for him to be the brilliant surgeon everyone says he is.
It's time to stop believing lies. Live boldly and unapologetically after 60.
The personal stuff can wait. A nurse appeared to tell them Paige was being settled in room 412 and they could go up in about 15 minutes. Brooke nodded her thanks and sat back down in the uncomfortable plastic chair, Allison beside her. You okay? Allison asked. No. But I will be. I have to be. They sat in silence for a while, watching other families navigate their own crises. Watching the ebb and flow of the emergency room. The organized chaos of people trying to save lives. When the 15 minutes were up, they took the elevator to the 4th floor. The hallways were painted in cheerful colors that were supposed to make children feel better but mostly just felt aggressively optimistic. Room 412 was at the end of the hall, the door half open. Brooke pushed through and saw Paige tucked into a hospital bed that made her look even smaller than 7 years old. And 4 in her arm. Monitors beeping softly beside her. Her eyes were closed but she stirred when Brooke entered, those unusual green eyes fluttering open. Mama. Her voice was small and scared. I'm here, baby. Brooke was at the bedside immediately, taking Paige's hand, smoothing the hair back from her forehead. I'm right here. You're in the hospital. You had a headache and you fell asleep. But the doctors are going to help you feel better. My head still hurts. I know, sweetheart. They're going to give you medicine for that. Allison hung back by the door, giving them space. Brooke was grateful for that. For the way her sister always seemed to know exactly what Brooke needed without being asked. A nurse came in. Older woman with gray hair pulled back in a practical bun and the kind of face that had seen too much to be surprised by anything. The name tag said Cheryl. I'm Cheryl. I'll be your daughter's primary nurse until the surgery. Dr. Reed wanted me to let you know he'll be by in an hour to go over the surgical plan with you. Is there anything you need right now? Coffee? Blankets? Anything for her when she wakes up more fully? She'll want her stuffed rabbit. Brooke said. It's in the bag my sister brought up. The purple backpack. Cheryl found it and set it on the bed beside Paige's hand. The worn purple rabbit that had been Paige's comfort object since she was 2 years old. She's a beautiful girl. Those eyes. Unusual color. My grandson has green eyes too. Got them from his father's side of the family. Brooke's throat tightened. Yes. Her father. Cheryl, who had clearly spent enough years in pediatric oncology to recognize a complicated story when she saw one, simply nodded and finished her checks. The surgery consent forms are here when you're ready. Take your time with them. Read everything. Ask questions. Dr. Reed is the best we have. But you should never sign something you don't understand. After she left, Brooke pulled the forms toward her. Medical history. Emergency contacts. Risks of surgery. Bleeding. Infection. Stroke. Damage to healthy brain tissue. Changes in cognitive function. Death. She read that last word 3 times. Then she found a pen and started filling out what she could. Name. Paige Isabel Torres. Age: 7. Date of birth: June 14, 2017. Medical history: none significant. Allergies: none known. Mother's name: Brooke Alexandra Torres. Emergency contact: Allison Marie Torres, sister. Father's name. The line sat empty. Brooke stared at it for a long moment. She could write unknown. She could write not applicable. She could write the truth for the first time in 7 years. She left it blank. The risks section required her signature. She read through each one carefully. I understand that this surgery carries risks including but not limited to. The list was long and terrifying. She signed anyway. Dated at October 17, 2024. Put the pen down before her hands could start shaking. Paige woke up fully about 20 minutes later, groggy and confused. Brooke was there immediately, explaining in the gentle voice she'd perfected over 7 years that she was in the hospital. That the doctors were going to help with the headaches. That Mama wasn't going anywhere. Am I going to die? Paige asked with the particular directness of children who haven't learned yet that some questions are supposed to stay unspoken. No, baby. You have something in your head that doesn't belong there. And the doctors are going to take it out. You're going to be fine. You promise? Brooke thought about all the promises she'd made in 7 years. The ones she'd kept and the ones she'd had no business making. She made another one she had no power to guarantee. I promise. Paige seemed satisfied with that. She held her purple rabbit close and asked if she could watch something on Brooke's phone. Brooke pulled up her daughter's favorite show and let her watch, grateful for anything that would distract from the fear. Allison stayed until visiting hours ended at 8, then hugged Brooke hard and promised to come back first thing in the morning with a change of clothes and Brooke's phone charger. After she left, the room felt very quiet. Just Brooke and Paige and the soft beeping of monitors. A nurse brought in a reclining chair that folded out into something resembling a bed. Not comfortable, but functional. The kind of furniture designed for parents keeping vigil. Brooke tried to sleep but couldn't. She kept thinking about Garrett. About the look on his face when he'd seen her in the waiting room. About the way his voice had caught when he said your daughter. About the fact that in less than 2 days, he would hold a scalpel over their child's brain and neither of them would be able to pretend anymore that the past didn't matter. She must have dozed eventually because she woke to someone entering the room quietly. Garrett. In surgical scrubs. Checking the monitors with practiced hands even though that wasn't his job and there were nurses for that. It's late. Brooke's voice came out rough with sleep. What are you doing here? Couldn't sleep. Thought I'd check on her. He pulled a chair close to Paige's bedside. Not quite touching. Just watching her breathe with the particular intensity of someone looking at something important. She looks peaceful. He said after a moment. She's always been a good sleeper. Brooke sat up in the recliner, suddenly very aware that she probably looked terrible. That her hair was a mess and she was still wearing the clothes she taught in that afternoon. Even as a baby. 10 hours straight from 6 weeks old. That's lucky. Most parents aren't that fortunate. No. I was lucky in a lot of ways. The statement hung in the air between them. Loaded with everything they weren't saying. Garrett looked at Paige for a long moment. When's her birthday? June 14th. Why? Just getting a complete picture. For the medical history. Brooke watched him do the math. Watched something shift behind his eyes. 8 years ago they'd separated in late September, early October. June 14th would have put the due date in mid-June. Which meant conception in September. Which meant she would have been about 2 weeks pregnant when they separated. Maybe didn't even know yet. He didn't say anything. But she could see the calculation happening. Could see the question forming. How long have you been in Philadelphia? He asked instead. Never left. I teach art at Franklin Middle School. Have for 6 years. And her father? Still not in the picture. Brooke kept her voice neutral. Hasn't been since before she was born. Must be hard. Raising a child alone. It has its moments. But we manage. She's a good kid. Makes it easier. Garrett was quiet for another long moment. Then he stood. I should let you rest. Big day Thursday. I'll be by tomorrow morning to go over the surgical plan in more detail. Make sure you understand everything that's going to happen. Thank you, Brooke said. For checking on her. He paused at the door. She's a beautiful little girl. You've done a good job with her. After he left, Brooke sat in the dark and let herself think about all the versions of this night that could have existed. The one where she told him 7.5 years ago. The one where he'd been there for Paige's birth. The one where they'd raised her together instead of Brooke doing it alone. None of those versions existed. This was the one she had. A hospital room at midnight. A daughter with a brain tumor. An ex-boyfriend who was the only person who could save her. And a secret that was getting harder to keep with every passing hour. She pulled the blanket tighter around herself and watched Paige sleep, counting the rise and fall of her small chest, grateful for every breath. If this story is touching your heart, please take a moment to leave a comment telling me about a time you had to be strong for someone you love. And don't forget to share this with someone who needs to hear it. Your support means everything. Wednesday passed in a strange suspension of time that felt both too fast and not fast enough. Paige was in good spirits, all things considered. Charmed by the attention from nurses. Delighted by the iPad the child life specialist had brought by. Unaware of the complexities swirling around her in every adult conversation that stopped when she entered a room. Brooke's mother Diane arrived mid-morning from Baltimore, pulling Brooke into a hug that lasted longer than necessary. Both of them crying quietly while Paige was distracted by a cartoon. She's going to be fine. Diane said it like a fact. Like saying it firmly enough would make it true. I know. Brooke said, not sure if she believed it. Garrett came by twice that day. Once in the morning to review the final scans with Brooke. Going over every detail of what would happen in surgery. The incision. The craniotomy. The mapping process. The tumor resection. Speaking in clear, simple terms that Brooke appreciated even though hearing the details made it all more terrifyingly real. And once in the evening to talk to Paige directly about what would happen tomorrow in language a 7-year-old could understand. Brooke watched from the corner of the room as he knelt beside Paige's bed. His voice gentle in a way she'd only heard a few times before. Explaining about the medicine that would help her sleep. The special hat the doctors would use to see inside her head. The bandage she'd have after and how it would help her heal. Will it hurt? Paige asked. Not during. You'll be asleep the whole time. After, yes, it will hurt some. But we'll have medicine to help with that. Really good medicine. And your mom will be right there when you wake up. Paige looked at Brooke, then back at Garrett. Are you the best doctor? I'm very good at what I do. And I promise I'm going to take very good care of you. Mama says I have my daddy's eyes. Paige said it matter-of-factly, the way children do when they're just making conversation. Do you know what color my daddy's eyes are? The room went very still. Brooke stopped breathing. Garrett's face did something complicated. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. I don't know, sweetheart. But your eyes are beautiful. Very unusual green. You're lucky to have them. I think so too. Paige said, satisfied, and went back to her iPad. Garrett stood. Looked at Brooke once with an expression she couldn't read. And left without another word. That night, after Paige finally fell asleep, after Diane and Allison had both gone home with promises to return first thing in the morning, Brooke sat in the reclining chair and tried not to think about all the ways tomorrow could go wrong. She'd read the consent forms a dozen times. She understood the risks. 4% chance of complications. 89% chance of complete resection. Numbers that meant everything and nothing when they applied to your only child. She must have dozed eventually because she woke to someone entering the room quietly. Garrett again. In surgical scrubs. The clock on the wall said 4:07 in the morning. You keep checking on her. Brooke said, her voice rough with sleep. I wanted to see her. Before tomorrow. Before you operate on her. Yes. He pulled the chair close to Paige's bedside. Not quite touching. Just watching her breathe with that same intensity from the night before. The silence stretched between them. Heavy with everything unsaid. She snores a little. He said after a moment. She got that from you. The words were out before Brooke could stop them. Garrett's head turned sharply. From me. Brooke's heart hammered. She'd just revealed what she'd been hiding. There was no taking it back now. She has your eyes, Garrett. Your mind. Your stubborn refusal to give up on anything once you've decided it matters. She's been reading since she was 4. Does math in her head faster than I can do it on paper. Asks questions about everything. Wants to understand how everything works. Garrett stood up slowly. His voice when he spoke was very quiet. Very controlled. When's her birthday, Brooke? June 14th. 2017. We separated in October 2016. Yes. Which means you were pregnant. When we separated. You were already pregnant. I found out 2 weeks after I moved out. And you didn't tell me. No. Why? The word came out sharp. Angry. You carried my child for 9 months. You gave birth. You raised her for 7 years. And you never once thought I deserved to know? You made it very clear you didn't want children. Brooke's voice was steady but her hands were shaking. You said it every time anyone asked when we were getting married. Every time your mother mentioned grandchildren. Not now, maybe never. Those were your exact words, Garrett. So you made the decision for both of us. I made the decision to not trap you with a child you'd told me repeatedly you didn't want. I made the decision to protect my daughter from growing up with a father who resented her for existing. You want to be angry about that? Fine. Be angry. But I'm not apologizing for it. The silence that followed was heavy enough to press against the walls. Somewhere down the hall, a monitor beeped. A cart rolled past the closed door. The ordinary sounds of a hospital at night, completely disconnected from the way Brooke's entire life had just split open. Does she know? Garrett asked finally. Does Paige know I'm her father? No. She knows she has a father who isn't around. She's asked about you exactly 4 times in 7 years. I've told her the truth each time. That her father is a good man who wasn't ready to be a dad. That it's not her fault. That some people just aren't meant for family. She's made her peace with it. Has she? She's 7 years old, Garrett. She doesn't have a framework yet for the kind of complicated I've been protecting her from. Protecting her from. Garrett's voice had gone cold. Or protecting yourself from having to share her. Both. Brooke met his eyes. I'm not going to lie to you and say this was entirely selfless. I didn't want to share her with someone who might love his work more than he loved her. I'd already lived that reality with you. I wasn't going to subject my daughter to it. Garrett walked to the window that looked out over the city. The lights of Philadelphia spreading out in all directions. When he spoke, his voice was tight with controlled emotion. I've done 61 of these surgeries in the last 3 years. I have an 89% complete resection rate. My complication rate is less than 4%. I can give you statistics. I can give you percentages. What I can't tell you is how I'm supposed to walk into an OR in less than 30 hours and operate on a child I didn't know existed until 2 minutes ago. Brooke stood. Crossed to where he was standing. Close enough that she could see his reflection in the window glass overlaid on the city lights. You're supposed to walk in there the same way you've walked in 61 times before. You're supposed to do your job. You're supposed to save her life. Not because she's yours, but because that's what you do. That's who you've spent 8 years becoming. The man who saves the children other people can't save. He turned to look at her directly. She saw in his face something she'd seen only a handful of times in the 3 years they'd been together. Genuine uncertainty mixed with anger and something that looked like grief. After, he said. After the surgery. After she recovers. We're going to have a very long conversation about what happens next. I know. And I'm going to be angry, Brooke. I'm already angry. I'm going to be angrier once I have space to process this. You kept my daughter from me for 7 years. That's not something I'm going to get over quickly. I know that too. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking you to save her life. Everything else can wait. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he picked up his tablet from where he'd set it on the chair and walked toward the door. He paused with his hand on the frame. I'll see you at 6. Surgical check-in. Don't be late. I won't be. After he left, Brooke sat down in the chair by the window and let herself shake the way she hadn't let herself shake while he was in the room. She'd just told him. After 7 years of silence. After building an entire life around the secret. She'd told him. And in less than 30 hours, she would hand their daughter over to him and trust him to bring her back. At 5:30, she woke Paige gently. Good morning, sweet girl. Today's the day. Paige, brave in the way children are when they trust the adults around them to know what they're doing, squeezed her hand. You'll be there when I wake up? Right beside you. First face you see. Promise? Promise. Diane and Allison arrived at 5:45. Both of them looking like they hadn't slept much either. They took turns hugging Paige. Telling her how brave she was. How proud they were of her. Cheryl came in at 6 to start the pre-surgical prep. Taking vitals. Checking the 4. Asking Paige questions to assess her neurological baseline before surgery. At 6:12, they wheeled Paige's bed out of the room and down the hallway toward the surgical wing. Brooke walked beside the bed, holding her daughter's hand. Diane and Allison followed. The pre-surgical bay was bright and cold and smelled like antiseptic. Other families were gathered in different bays. Other children being prepared for other surgeries. Other parents trying to be brave. The anesthesiologist introduced himself. Dr. Curtis Vaughn. He had a kind face and gentle hands. He explained to Paige exactly what would happen. The mask. The medicine. How she'd count backward from 10 and probably wouldn't make it past 7. You ready, sweetheart? Cheryl asked. Paige looked at Brooke. Mama? I'm right here, baby. You're going to go to sleep. And when you wake up, the headaches will be gone. And I'll be right there. First thing you see. Okay. Dr. Vaughn placed the mask over Paige's face. Count backward from 10 for me, sweetheart. 10. 9. 8. Paige's eyes started to flutter. 7. 6. She was out. Time to go, Mom. Cheryl said gently. We'll take good care of her. Dr. Reed is already scrubbing in. Brooke kissed Paige's forehead. Smoothed her hair one more time. And let Allison guide her away from the bed even though every instinct in her body was screaming to stay. We'll update you every hour. Cheryl called after them. The surgery should take between 5 and 7 hours. The surgical waiting room was painted a calming blue that wasn't calming at all. Diane sat on one side of Brooke. Allison on the other. Neither of them talking. What was there to say? A volunteer at the desk gave Brooke a pager that would update her on Paige's status. In surgery. A red light that would stay lit for the next 5 to 7 hours unless something went wrong faster than that. Brooke held the pager in both hands and watched the clock. 6:23. Garrett would be making the first incision soon. Opening their daughter's skull. Seeing her brain. Mapping the tumor. Deciding the best approach. She tried not to think about his hands. How steady they would need to be. How much precision was required. How one small slip could mean the difference between Paige waking up whole or waking up changed forever. 3 hours in, a surgical nurse came out. Young woman with tired eyes and a clipboard. Mrs. Torres? Yes. Brooke stood up so fast she felt dizzy. Everything's going well. Dr. Reed has visualized the tumor and started the resection. Paige is stable. All vitals are good. He wanted me to tell you he's very pleased with how it's progressing. Brooke nodded. Couldn't speak. Sat back down. Allison squeezed her hand. See? Allison whispered. He's got this. She's going to be fine. 5 hours in, Diane brought her coffee she didn't drink. Allison brought her a sandwich from the cafeteria she couldn't eat. The pager stayed red. In surgery. 6 hours in, Brooke went to the bathroom and stared at herself in the mirror. She looked like she'd aged 10 years overnight. Dark circles under her eyes. Hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Still wearing yesterday's clothes because she'd forgotten to ask Allison to bring her anything different. She thought about the fact that the last time she'd been this scared, she'd been in labor with Paige. Alone except for Allison. Bringing a child into the world without the father there to see it. She thought then that nothing would ever be harder than that. She'd been wrong. 7 hours and 4 minutes after they wheeled Paige away, the pager buzzed. Out of surgery. Dr. Reed will be out shortly to speak with you. Brooke stood in the middle of the waiting room. Unable to sit anymore. Unable to do anything but stand there and wait for Garrett to walk through those doors and tell her whether their daughter was coming back whole or changed or not at all. When he finally appeared, still in surgical scrubs with his cap and mask pulled down, he looked exhausted. But when he saw Brooke, something in his face softened. She's okay. He said it first, before anything else. And Brooke's legs almost gave out. The surgery went well. Complete resection. We got all of it. No unexpected complications. She's in recovery now. You can see her in about 40 minutes once she's more stable. Her speech, motor function. We won't know for certain until she wakes up fully and we can do a complete neurological assessment. But the intraoperative mapping showed no deficits. I'm optimistic. Very optimistic. Brooke sat down hard in the nearest chair. Diane's hand was on her shoulder. Allison was crying quietly. Somewhere in the distance Garrett was giving them more details about recovery and next steps and what to expect over the next few days. All Brooke could hear was she's okay. Later, after Diane and Allison had gone to get real food and make phone calls to the rest of the family, Garrett sat down beside Brooke in the waiting room. Not too close. A careful distance between them. Thank you. Brooke said. I know that's inadequate. But I don't have better words right now. You don't need to thank me for doing my job. I'm not thanking the doctor. I'm thanking the person you became. The choice you made 8 years ago to be this instead of something else. Garrett leaned back in the chair, staring up at the acoustic ceiling tiles. I kept thinking in there about what you said. About her having my mind. About her asking questions about how things work. And I thought about the fact that I've spent 8 years teaching residents and medical students. Passing on everything I know. And I never once got to answer my own daughter's questions about why the sky is blue or how birds fly or whatever 7-year-olds ask about. She asked last week why we fall down but the moon doesn't. I told her about gravity. She asked 11 follow-up questions. I had to look up 5 of the answers on my phone while making dinner. I would have loved that. Garrett said quietly. And it cost him something to admit it. I know. I'm sorry I took it from you. Are you? Really? Brooke thought about that. I'm sorry you didn't get those moments. I'm not sorry I made the choice I thought was right at the time with the information I had. Both things are true. A nurse appeared in the doorway. She's awake. Asking for her mom. Brooke stood immediately. Garrett stood with her. Can I come too? He asked. Just for a minute. I want to see her awake. Make sure she's really okay. You're her doctor. You don't need my permission. I'm not asking as her doctor. Brooke looked at him. At the uncertainty in his face. At the hope mixed with fear. And made a decision. Yes. Come see your daughter. Paige was groggy but awake in the PICU. A white bandage wrapped around her head like a turban. Monitors were beeping steadily beside her. Her eyes found Brooke immediately, and Brooke was there, taking her hand, smoothing her hair, being the first face she saw just like she'd promised. Hi, baby. You did so good. It's all over. You're going to be fine. Head hurts. Paige whispered. I know, sweet girl. The nurses are going to help with that. They have really good medicine. Garrett stood back, letting Brooke have the moment. But Paige's eyes found him anyway. Those unusual green eyes that matched his own. You're the doctor. You fixed my head. I did. You were very brave. Mama said you're the best. Are you? I tried my best for you. And I think it went really well. Paige seemed to accept this. Her eyes already drifting closed again. The exhaustion of surgery pulling her back under. Before she went completely to sleep, she mumbled something that made Garrett's hand tighten on the bed rail. You have green eyes like me. Yes. I do. But Paige was already asleep again. Brooke was grateful for it. For the reprieve. For a few more days before the conversation they'd eventually have to have about who exactly the doctor with the green eyes was. Garrett left after a few more minutes. Told Brooke he'd check on Paige again in a few hours. That he had 2 other surgeries scheduled that afternoon, but he'd make sure the PICA team had his direct number if anything changed. After he left, Brooke sat beside Paige's bed and cried. Not the scared crying from before. But the relief crying. The kind that comes when you've been holding your breath for so long you forgot what normal breathing felt like. Allison found her like that 20 minutes later. Took one look at her sister's face and pulled her into a hug that lasted a full minute. She's okay. Allison said into Brooke's hair. She's okay. You did it. You got her here. You saved her. He saved her. Brooke pulled back, wiping her eyes. Garrett saved her. You both did. The first 3 days after surgery were measured in small victories. Paige waking up for longer periods. Paige speaking in full sentences without slurring. Paige moving all her fingers and toes on command when the neurologist tested her. Paige keeping down solid food. Paige asking for her purple rabbit and her iPad and whether she could watch her favorite show. Each milestone a gift. Each one watched carefully by a rotation of nurses and residents and Garrett himself, who stopped by 3 times a day even though he had other patients, other surgeries, other places he was supposed to be. Brooke noticed. She didn't comment on it. But she noticed. On the 4th day, Paige was moved out of the PICU to a regular room. Bright with afternoon sunlight and decorated with get-well cards from her 2nd grade class that Allison had picked up from the school. The room felt almost cheerful. Almost normal. If you ignored the monitors and the 4-pole and the bandage still wrapped around Paige's head. Paige was sitting up in bed, working on a coloring book the child life specialist had brought, when Garrett came by during what Brooke assumed was supposed to be his lunch break. How's the artist today? I can't color inside the lines good. My hand is shaky. That's normal after brain surgery. It'll get better with practice. The brain is amazing at healing itself. Can I see what you're working on? Paige showed him a picture of a butterfly. Half-colored in purple crayon with lines that wandered outside the borders. I think it's beautiful. Sometimes the best art doesn't worry about staying inside the lines. That's what Mama says too. About my drawings at home. Your mama is a wise woman. Paige studied him with the particular intensity of children who are trying to figure out where an adult fits in their world. Do you have kids? Brooke, sitting in the corner of the room reading a book she wasn't actually reading, went very still. Garrett glanced at her once. Then back at Paige. That's a complicated question. How come? Because sometimes adults make things more complicated than they need to be. Mama says that too. Mostly about taxes and insurance and stuff. Garrett smiled. A real one. And Brooke saw in that smile the man she'd loved 8 years ago. The one who'd shown up occasionally between 18-hour shifts and made her believe for a few hours at a time that they could make it work. Your mama sounds very smart. She is. She teaches art. And she makes really good pancakes. And she always knows when I'm sad even if I don't say anything. She sounds like a really good mom. The best. Paige said it with the absolute certainty of a 7-year-old who'd never known anything different. Garrett looked at Brooke then. Something complicated moving across his face. When he spoke, his voice was careful. I think you're very lucky to have her. After he left, Paige went back to her coloring. Brooke watched her daughter's shaky hand work the purple crayon across the page and thought about all the conversations that were coming. All the ways this careful balance couldn't last. Over the next week, as Paige recovered enough to be restless and bored and fully herself again, a rhythm developed. Brooke stayed at the hospital most days. Diane relieving her in the evenings so Brooke could go home, shower, sleep in her own bed for a few hours. Allison came by after work with dinner and gossip from the outside world and a determination to keep things feeling normal. And Garrett came by at unpredictable times. Early morning before his surgical schedule. Late at night after his last case. Sometimes in the middle of the day between procedures. He always had a reason. Checking Paige's reflexes. Reviewing the latest scans. Adjusting medications. Consulting with the pediatric oncology team about the follow-up plan. But increasingly, he stayed longer than those tasks required. Talking to Paige about her coloring. About the books she liked to read. About the friends she missed from school. About her rock collection at home and how she could tell the difference between sedimentary and igneous and metamorphic. He never said he was her father. Brooke never told Paige the truth. It hung between them like a question waiting to be asked. Growing heavier each day. On the 10th day, when Paige was well enough to be discharged with a follow-up schedule and strict activity restrictions, Garrett came to the room as Brooke was packing their things to go home. She's doing remarkably well. He watched Paige show Diane a puzzle she'd completed. Better than most patients twice her age. She's resilient. She gets that from you too. Brooke said quietly. The stubborn refusal to let anything keep her down. I'd like to see her. After discharge. Not as her doctor. She'll follow up with pediatric oncology for monitoring. But as something else. I don't know what to call it yet. You want to be in her life. Yes. Brooke had known this conversation was coming. Had been preparing for it since the night before surgery when he'd sat beside Paige's bed and learned the truth. Knowing it was coming didn't make it easier. She's going to ask questions. Why this doctor keeps visiting. Why you're around more than doctors usually are. She's 7, Garrett, but she's not stupid. Eventually, she'll ask directly. And when she does, we tell her the truth. Together. Not me alone, not you alone. Both of us, so she knows from the start that whatever this is, we're handling it as adults who care about her more than we care about our own hurt feelings. Garrett nodded slowly. When? I don't know. Soon. But let her heal first. Let her get home, get back to some version of normal. Then we'll tell her. Okay. He looked at Paige one more time. Brooke saw in his face something she'd never seen when they were together. Unguarded love for something beyond his work. beyond himself. It changed his whole face. Made him look younger and older at the same time. "I missed so much," he said quietly. "I know. I'm sorry. I don't want to miss anymore." "You won't. I won't let you. Not anymore." 3 weeks after discharge, Paige was off most of her medications. Headache-free. Cleared for light activity. The incision had healed to a thin red line under her hair that would eventually fade to white. The tumor was gone. The margins clean. The prognosis excellent. By every medical measure, she was a success story. Garrett had visited twice at Brooke's small house in Fairmount. Awkward at first in the space she'd built without him. The kitchen with Paige's artwork on the fridge. The living room with toys in every corner. The life that had gone on for 7 years while he was becoming someone else entirely. But Paige warmed to him quickly. The way she warmed to most people. By the second visit, she was showing him her rock collection and explaining the difference between igneous and sedimentary with the authority of a child who'd watched too many geology videos. On a Sunday afternoon in early November, with leaves turning gold outside the kitchen window, Brooke asked Paige to sit at the table because she and Dr. Reed needed to talk to her about something important. Paige climbed into her chair. Serious in the way children get when they sense something big is coming. Garrett sat across from her. Brooke beside her. For a moment, nobody spoke. "Am I sick again?" Paige asked. Fear flickering across her face. "No, baby. No. You're healthy. This isn't about that." "Then what?" Brooke looked at Garrett. He nodded slightly. She took a breath and said the thing she'd been practicing for 3 weeks and still had no good words for.
It's time to stop believing lies. Live boldly and unapologetically after 60.
You know how you've asked me before about your dad? About why he's not around? Yeah. You said he wasn't ready to be a dad. That's true. But it's not the whole truth. The whole truth is that when I found out I was pregnant with you, your dad and I had just separated. We decided we wanted different things. And I made a choice not to tell him about you because I thought I was protecting both of you. Paige's eyes went to Garrett. Then back to Brooke. The math happening behind those unusual green eyes. "Is Dr. Reed my dad?" "Yes," Brooke said. "He is." Paige looked at Garrett for a long moment. "Did you know? Before you did my surgery?" "No." Garrett's voice was steady despite the fact that Brooke could see his hands clasped tight under the table. "I found out the night before. I wish I'd known sooner. I wish I'd been there for every birthday and every scraped knee and every time you needed someone. But I didn't know. And I can't change that now. What I can do is be here now. If you want me to be." "Why didn't you tell him, Mama?" It was the question Brooke had been dreading. The one she couldn't answer with anything that wouldn't sound like an excuse. "Because I thought he wouldn't want you. And I couldn't stand the idea of you growing up feeling unwanted. I made a choice for him without asking him. And that wasn't fair. I'm sorry for that. To both of you." Paige was quiet. Processing in the way children process when the world suddenly has a new shape they need to fit themselves into. "Do I have to call you Dad?" she asked Garrett. "No. You can call me Garrett, or Dr. Reed, or nothing at all if you want. Whatever feels right to you. Do you want to be my dad?" Garrett's voice broke slightly on the answer. "Very much. Yes. Even though you didn't know about me before? Especially because I didn't know before. I have a lot of time to make up for." Paige thought about this. Her small face serious. "Okay. But I'm still going to call you Garrett for now. Dad is a big word. Garrett is perfect." She looked at Brooke. "Are you and Garrett going to get married?" "No, baby. That's not what this is. This is about you and Garrett getting to know each other. Me and Garrett are figuring out how to be your parents together without being together ourselves. Like Sophie's parents. They're divorced but they both come to school things. Something like that, yes. Paige seemed to accept this with the particular resilience of children who'd already survived brain surgery and figured everything else was manageable by comparison. Can I go call Sophie and tell her my dad saved my life? She asked. That's pretty cool. Brooke laughed, surprising herself. Yes. You can call Sophie. Paige ran off to get the phone, leaving Garrett and Brooke alone at the kitchen table. That went better than I expected. Garrett said. She's resilient. And she's wanted a dad for a long time. Even if she didn't say it directly. What about you? How are you? It was the first time he'd asked her directly. Brooke didn't have a simple answer. I'm relieved. I'm terrified. I'm grateful you handled that so well. I'm angry at myself for waiting this long. Everything all at once. That sounds about right. They sat in silence for a moment, listening to Paige's excited voice from the other room telling Sophie that yes, her actual real dad did her brain surgery, and yes, he has green eyes just like hers. I meant what I said. Garrett told Brooke. About not missing any more. I want to be at school things. And birthdays. And regular Tuesdays. I want to know her favorite color and what she's afraid of and what makes her laugh. I want all of it. I'll help you. I promise. I won't keep her from you anymore. And us? What are we? Brooke thought about that. We're her parents. That's all we need to be right now. The rest, we'll figure out. The rest turned out to be complicated in ways that were both harder and easier than Brooke expected. Garrett started coming to dinner once a week. Awkward at first with domesticity. Gradually learning the rhythm of bedtime routines and homework help. The difference between the goodnight hug Paige would accept and the tucking in she still only wanted from Brooke. He came to Paige's first day back at school in late November. Standing in the back of the classroom beside Brooke. Watching their daughter show her classmates the scar under her hair and explain what a neurosurgeon does with the confidence of someone who'd experienced it firsthand. He took her to the Franklin Institute on a Saturday in December. Just the two of them. And brought her home with stories about the planetarium and the giant heart you could walk through. His whole face transformed in a way Brooke had never seen. She watched him fall in love with their daughter in real time. And it was beautiful and painful in equal measure. Beautiful because Paige deserved a father who looked at her like she hung the moon. Painful because Brooke could see now, with the clarity of hindsight, what she'd taken from both of them by keeping silent. If you're holding your breath like I am, if this story has you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button. And if you believe in the power of love and forgiveness, subscribe to hear how this family finds their way back to each other. 6 months after the surgery, Paige had a follow-up MRI that came back clean. No recurrence. No residual tumor. Just a brain that had healed around the absence of what didn't belong there. Reorganizing itself the way brains do. Making new pathways and stronger connections. She's remarkable. The pediatric oncologist said, showing them the scans. Every marker looks good. We'll keep monitoring every 6 months for the next 2 years, then annually after that. But I'm very encouraged by what I'm seeing. In the hallway after, Garrett hugged Paige with the kind of relief that comes from holding your breath for half a year and finally being able to exhale. You did it, kiddo. You beat it. We beat it. Paige corrected. You fixed it, and Mama helped me be brave, and we all did it together. At 8 years old, she'd had a birthday in June with both parents present for the first time. Paige had developed a firm belief in the power of teamwork that she applied to everything from science projects to cleaning her room. That night, after Brooke put Paige to bed, Garrett lingered in the kitchen instead of leaving immediately the way he usually did. Coffee? Brooke offered. Please. They sat at the same table where they told Paige the truth 6 months ago. Brooke waited because she could tell Garrett had something on his mind. I've been thinking. he said finally. About what you said. That you didn't tell me because you thought I'd resent her for existing. That I loved my work more than I could love anything else. Garrett, you don't have to do this. Let me finish. You were right. 8 years ago, you were completely right. I was so consumed with saving every patient, with perfecting every technique, that I couldn't see anything else. I would have tried to be her father because it was the right thing to do. And I would have failed. And she would have known. You saved her from that. Brooke's throat tightened. And now? Now I'm someone different. Becoming her father didn't make me different. I had to become different first before I could be the father she deserves. That's the part I'm still working on understanding. Whether I became this person because you left. Or whether I would have eventually gotten here anyway. Does it matter? It matters to me. Because if I had to lose you to become someone worthy of her, then I don't know what to do with that math. Brooke reached across the table. Took his hand. The first time she'd touched him deliberately in 8 years. You don't have to do anything with it. You just have to keep showing up for her. That's all. Is there any part of you? Garrett's voice was careful. That wonders what it would look like if we tried again? Not for her. For us. Brooke pulled her hand back gently. I can't think about that right now. Maybe not ever. What we have works. We're good parents to her together. I don't want to risk breaking that by wanting more. Even if the more is real? Especially then. Garrett nodded. Accepting it in a way that told Brooke he'd expected the answer. Okay. But Brooke? If you ever change your mind, I'll be here. I'm not going anywhere this time. 2 years after the surgery, Paige turned 10 with a party in the backyard of Brooke's house. Filled with schoolmates and family and the particular chaos of children hopped up on cake and sunshine. Garrett had helped set up in the morning. Stringing lights and arranging tables with the competence of a surgeon who'd learned that precision applied to party planning too. He stayed all afternoon. Talking to Diane like they'd known each other for years instead of 2. Helping Paige's friends with a science experiment activity she'd insisted on instead of traditional games. Brooke watched him from the kitchen window. This man who'd been a stranger to his own daughter and was now the person Paige called first when she had exciting news. She felt something she'd kept carefully locked away for years begin to shift. Allison appeared beside her. Following her gaze. You're looking at him differently these days. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. You're looking at him the way you used to look at him. Before everything fell apart. That would be stupid. We're good co-parents. Why mess that up? Maybe because he's in love with you. Has been the whole 2 years. And you're in love with him too. You're just too stubborn to admit it. He's not in love with me. We're just raising our daughter together. Vivian. He comes to dinner 3 times a week. He fixed your leaking sink last month. He brings you coffee the way you like it without being asked. The man is in love with you. The question is whether you're going to do anything about it. Brooke didn't answer. She watched Garrett help Paige light the candles on her cake. Watched the way he looked at their daughter like she was the best thing he'd ever had a hand in creating. And thought about the version of her life where she let herself want more than the careful distance they'd maintained. That night, after the guests had left and Paige was asleep, exhausted and happy, Brooke walked Garrett to his car. Thank you for today. She loved having you here. I loved being here. They stood in the driveway under the streetlight. Something in the air felt different. Charged with the possibility of words that hadn't been said yet. Garrett. Brooke started, then stopped. Not sure how to finish. Yes? Do you remember what you said? 6 months after the surgery? About wondering what it would look like if we tried again. I remember. I think I'm ready to find out. If the offer still stands. Garrett went very still. Are you sure? Because I meant what I said then. I'm not going anywhere. I can wait as long as you need. I'm sure. I've spent 2 years watching you become the father I always hoped you'd be. And somewhere in there, I started seeing you differently. Not the man who walked away. The man who came back and stayed. I didn't come back for you. Garrett said honestly. I came back for her. You know that. I know. But you stayed for both of us. I see it in every Tuesday dinner. Every school pickup you didn't have to volunteer for. Every time you ask me how my day was like, the answer actually matters to you. You're not the same person you were 8 years ago. Neither am I. Maybe that's enough to build something new. Garrett closed the distance between them. His hand coming up to cup her face the way he used to years ago. I never stopped loving you. Even when I was angry. Even when I didn't know how to be what you needed. You were always the one. I just had to lose you to understand that. We lost a lot of time. Brooke said. Then let's not waste any more. He kissed her under the streetlight in front of the house where she'd raised their daughter alone. And it felt like coming home and starting over at the same time. Inside, Paige slept peacefully. Her brain healed. Her family whole in a way it had never been before. In a house filled with evidence of all the ways love survives even when it has to rebuild itself from broken pieces. 3 years later, Brooke stood in the same backyard where they'd celebrated Paige's 10th birthday. Wearing a simple cream dress and holding a bouquet of wildflowers. While Garrett waited for her under an arch their daughter had helped decorate with purple ribbons and white roses. It was a small wedding. Just family and close friends. Because neither of them needed anything big. They'd already survived the hard parts. The separation. The secrets. The surgery that brought them back together in the most impossible way. Paige stood beside them as the officiant spoke. 13 now and proud to be part of the ceremony. Holding the rings they'd chosen together as a family. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, Paige stage whispered loud enough for everyone to hear, "If anyone says anything, I'm fighting them." The small gathering laughed. Because she absolutely would. Garrett kissed his bride under the same lights he'd hung for a birthday party 3 years ago. And Brooke kissed him back. And somewhere in Philadelphia, a hospital continued saving lives. And a middle school continued teaching art. And a daughter who'd survived the unsurvivable watched her parents choose each other again. Properly this time. With full knowledge of everything it cost and everything it was worth. That night, after the guests had gone home and Paige was asleep, Brooke and Garrett sat on the back porch. His arm around her shoulders. Her head on his chest. Listening to the quiet sounds of a neighborhood at rest. "Do you think about it?" Garrett asked. "What our lives would look like if you'd told me 8 years ago." "Sometimes. Less than I used to. And I think we wouldn't be here. We'd be some other version of us. Maybe better in some ways. Maybe worse in others. But we wouldn't be this. And I like this. I love this." Garrett corrected. "I love you. I love our daughter. I love that I get to come home to both of you every night now instead of just visiting. The great Dr. Reed, going soft in his old age. Only for you too. Everyone else still thinks I'm terrifying." Brooke laughed and tilted her face up to kiss him. "Good. We need someone to scare off boys in a few years when Paige starts dating. I'm already prepared. I have a list of surgical instruments I plan to display prominently when anyone comes to the door." They sat in comfortable silence. And Brooke thought about all the versions of her life that could have existed. The one where Garrett never walked into that waiting room. The one where the surgery went wrong. The one where she never found the courage to let him in again after everything they'd lost. This version, the one where they'd both broken and rebuilt and found their way back to each other through their daughter's second chance at life, was the one she'd keep. Not because it was perfect. Nothing ever was. But because it was real. And hard-won. And built on a foundation strong enough to survive anything. Upstairs, Paige slept peacefully. Her future stretching out ahead of her healthy and bright. unaware that the greatest gift her parents had given her wasn't the surgery that saved her life, but the willingness to forgive each other's failures and build something honest from the pieces. In the morning, Garrett would go to the hospital and save other people's children. Brooke would go to school and teach other people's teenagers about perspective and light. And Paige would wake up in a house with both her parents under the same roof. Finally, the family she'd always deserved and almost never got. But tonight, they were simply three people who'd survived the hardest things and chosen each other on the other side of them. Sitting in the dark, grateful for second chances and the particular grace of love that refuses to stay broken. Now, my dear friends, let's talk about what we can learn from Brooke, Garrett, and Paige's story. Because this isn't just a story about a medical crisis or a second chance at love. It's a story about the choices we make when we're scared. About protection and harm looking the same from different angles. About people changing when they're finally ready. First lesson. Sometimes our best intentions don't have simple outcomes. Brooke protected Paige from an absent father. But she also deprived Garrett of fatherhood. Both truths coexist. And we have to learn to live with that complexity instead of pretending our choices are purely good or purely bad. Second lesson. People change when they're ready, not when we need them to. Garrett had to become different before he could be the father Paige needed. That transformation couldn't be forced earlier. Sometimes walking away is exactly what allows someone to become who they're meant to be. Third lesson. Secrets have a cost we don't always see until it's too late. 8 years of silence created pain that honesty earlier might have prevented. But Brooke made the best choice she could with the information she had at the time. That's all any of us can do. Make decisions with what we know in the moment and forgive ourselves for what we couldn't see coming. Fourth lesson. Crisis reveals what matters. That medical emergency forced conversations that might never have happened otherwise. Sometimes it takes devastation to bring truth to light. Sometimes we need to be broken open before we can be honest. Fifth lesson. Put the child first, even when your own heart is complicated. Brooke and Garrett put Paige above their own feelings. They co-parented with grace even when they were hurt and angry. That's what good parents do. They make it about the child, not about winning. Sixth lesson. Forgiveness has many sides. Both Garrett and Brooke had to forgive themselves. Both had to forgive each other. That's the only way they could build something new. Not by pretending the past didn't happen, but by acknowledging it and choosing to move forward anyway. Seventh lesson. Family can be rebuilt. It doesn't have to look traditional to be real and strong. Different isn't less. It's just different. And sometimes different is exactly what we need. Eighth lesson. Children are more resilient than we give them credit for. Paige handled the truth with grace because her parents presented it honestly. Don't underestimate young people's capacity to understand difficult things when we trust them with the truth. Ninth lesson. Love that survives hardship is stronger for it. Brooke and Garrett's reunion was built on reality, not fantasy. It was tested by fire and came out real. That's the kind of love that lasts. 10th lesson. Showing up matters more than being perfect. Garrett couldn't change the past, but he could be present for the future. Consistency beats perfection every single time. Just keep showing up. That's what love looks like in real life. Sometimes the longest journey is the one back to the people we love. Sometimes we have to break completely before we can rebuild into something stronger. And sometimes the child we're trying to protect ends up being the one who saves us all. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's carrying a secret that feels too heavy. Someone who's trying to co-parent with grace. Someone who believes in second chances but doesn't know if it's possible for them. Let them know it is. Let them know that broken things can be made whole again. Not the same as before, but whole in a new way. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about love, forgiveness, and second chances. And tell me in the comments, do you believe in second chances? Have you ever had to forgive someone who hurt you? Have you ever been forgiven for something you thought was unforgivable? I'd love to hear your story. Thank you for being part of this journey. Thank you for listening to Brooke and Garrett and Paige's story. Thank you for believing that love can survive even the hardest things. Until next time, remember that you are stronger than you think. You are braver than you know. And you are loved more than you can imagine. This is Mr. Hawthorne Soul Stories, reminding you that every ending is just a new beginning waiting to happen.